Okay, if people just a couple minutes, then we'll start. Um, okay, let's see. We give people one more minute, then we'll start. Thank you for joining. Uh, it, uh, I'm in a different location tonight. I'm in Yafo at Mishkanot Ruth Daniel, which is a guest house owned by the Reform Movement. And we had Shabbat dinner here, and I'd been told that every evening we would be back at the hotel by 7:30 Israel time, and that's why I set the time for this, the Zoom call for this time, and they did not abide by that this today. Uh, so I actually told them, I was like, they're just finishing up their program. I told them, you guys take the bus back, and I'm going to have my Zoom call with my community, and then take a I will take a taxi back uh, after I'm done with my Zoom call. But thank you for joining, and I will just jump right in. The day started out a little uninteresting, but it certainly had an interesting end to it. The first meeting we actually had today was in yes, Shabbat Shalom from Tel Aviv. And if I disappear for a second, you'll still be able to hear me. You just won't see me because I'm pulling up the notes I took on my phone. So apologies for that. But the day started off very interesting. Um, with hearing from Miri Eisen. Miri Eisen is a military expert. I've heard her speak several times. And by the way, she talked about how whenever she talks about Israel, she starts off by acknowledging that Palestinians are victims and that Israel has screwed up some when it comes to the Palestinians. And then she goes into talking about Israel's needs because she's learned when she's talking on MSNBC or CNN or whatever that if she just starts talking about defending Israel, um, that uh, that people who are anti-Israel tune her out. But if she starts off by showing some sympathy for the Palestinians and stuff, then they actually listen to her what she has to say. And she talked about how Hamas is what she calls a terrorist hybrid organization. And what that means is like think about uh, the Boston Marathon bombers. These were lone wolf guys who were radicalized online, and then they created their own homemade bomb. But with Hamas, you have an actual almost military like structure. You have different ranks, you have an organization, and stuff like this. So they're a terrorist organization that behaves like an army. And um, and she talked about how the war is and is not going the same way that Hamas planned. Um, we underestimated Hamas when we knew what they were planning. They were pretty open about what they were planning to do, but nobody thought it was possible. They're like, okay, they can say that, but they're not going to invade and take over southern Israel and kidnap all. Like that's not going to happen. And then it did. And so she talked about there being three stages really for this war. And stage one, well, first of all, also, their terrorism is innovative. They are looking at what the situation is and how to adapt. But stage one was Hamas, which was a tremendous success, is Hamas beats Israel in a way that Israel has never been beaten. It presents strength to the Arab world, and they project Israel's humiliation. Everyone was supposed to join in, and they didn't. This is what went wrong way for Hamas. So what went right for Hamas was they had this incredible victory over Israel that was unprecedented, showed their strength, their capability, and humiliated Israel to the Arab world. Uh, to the West, we focus on the humanitarian issue, um, how many innocent civilians were killed, and so on and so forth. But in the Middle East, what the focus was on was less the humanitarian issue and more of the perception of strength and Israel's strength being undermined. And so this was a tremendous success for Hamas. But what they believed was going to happen was that everybody was going to join in, that the entire Muslim world would see Israel on the brink of defeat and see Israel's vulnerability and seize that moment and liberate Palestine from the river to the sea. That everyone was going to join in that moment, and everybody was going to join in. Let me just make sure there's nobody in the waiting room. And band together to destroy Israel. Hezbollah was going to join in. Iran was going to join in. All of the Arab countries, even the ones that had made peace with Israel, were going to join in. And the Israeli Arab population was going to take up arms, and so were the Palestinians in the West Bank, and Israel was going to be destroyed. That did not happen. And it kind of showed that all these people talking about the Zionist entity and how it needed to be destroyed had their opportunity and did not seize it, and that it's really just lip service, and that they don't actually care about the Palestinians as much as they say they do. Also, with this, what was surprising is we hear about fight or flight often when somebody's put in a difficult situation. But one of the things that we also experience is people freeze when they get scared or they're attacked. They just freeze. They come a deer in the headlights. And Israelis did not freeze. Israelis jumped into action, and everyday civilians, like I've talked about, took over and started mobilizing to help each other and volunteering and doing everything that they could, and are still doing everything that they can to help fellow Israelis. Stage two, it was Hamas's media manipulation. First of all, 100% denial of what you did, saying like, "Oh, the Zionists made up the horrible things that we did, even though they filmed it themselves." And you even heard Queen Rania from Jordan, who's like one of the most articulate, intelligent, thoughtful people out there, saying, "I need to see proof. How do I know that Israel's not inflating numbers? How do I really know that Hamas did these terrible things?" And that was, and it pretty much reaches a level like Holocaust denial when you hear that. It's shocking and painful. And then Hamas also has, through their media manipulation, is denying that you did anything wrong, and that people that are generating this idea as a result, and Hamas has been doing this for years very successfully, and we're seeing that Hamas's attack on Israel was legitimate. You're seeing this even like the Utah Muslim community, one of the prominent Muslim organizations in Utah that I actually like a good bit. They sent out a message condemning Hamas's actions against Israel and the terrorist attacks. I won't close the door. And the terrorist attacks against Israel. But at the same time, they said, but however, it's impossible to talk about what happened without talking about how this was a consequence of Israeli occupation. And it's like, no, it wasn't. I mean, you can say that, but an 8-month-old baby was thrown into an oven. People were beheaded. People were raped. Like, the, there's actually one more hostage now than there was on October 7th because a woman gave birth who was 9 months pregnant as a hostage. And so we're what Hamas has done for years and years, and the Palestinians have done so effectively, is create a narrative which we have seen that their terrorism is legitimate because they are pushing back against white colonial oppression and occupation. This is an act of resistance. And stage 3 is to build a defense system on many levels. Take hostages as your bargaining chip. They use them as a get out of jail free card. Use them as a defense system. And that was something I think Hamas was surprised about, that Israel still went after them with a vengeance. And Israelis have said, this was in the Jerusalem Post or Ynet News today, the Israeli army, a soldier said, follow the hospitals and you'll find the terrorists. When I'm looking for terrorists, I look for a hospital or I look for a school because I know that's where I will find them. And indeed, people with the Al-Shifa hospital are feeling like that was a little anticlimactic of like, oh, Israel said that this was the Hamas headquarters. And, we didn't see any huge revelations come to light. Like, yeah, there was some terrorist stuff. There were 5 terrorists inside the hospital who were killed by Israel and stuff. But where's the big smoking gun? Well, Israel found tunnel shafts at the hospital. And the thing is that think of an elevator or like an underground parking lot, how there's -1, -2, -3, -4. Those shafts go down several levels, and there's an intricate underground system, and you can't just go straight down if you're the Israeli army because each level is booby trapped. So they are still figuring out just how much is underneath the Al-Shifa hospital. But and again, this is the media manipulation. I saw a headline yesterday that talked about how an Al-Shifa hospital director saying Israel is kidnapping bodies from our hospital. Well, yeah, they kidnapped 2 bodies, which were 2 hostages who had been found murdered, whose bodies were at or next to the Al-Shifa hospital. Those were the bodies Israel was taking. And today, one of those people, who is a 19-year-old soldier named Noah Marciano, she was 3 weeks ago shown alive in a Hamas video. And then intelligence found out that she was dead, and through that intelligence, they knew exactly where her body was. And so they retrieved her body yesterday, and today she had her funeral in Jerusalem, in Modi'in, her hometown, and thousands of Israelis showed up to it. And with this too, what this shows is that Hamas hides among civilian populations and makes it so that the narrative is Israel versus Gaza or the oppressed Palestinians, not Israel versus Hamas. And so, like, we see often that on the media, the Israel-Gaza war, especially we've seen that in previous years. And what this is saying is, no, that's what they're trying to do. Israel is attacking the Palestinians, not that Israel is attacking Hamas. And as a result, we underestimated media manipulation, the delegitimizing and demonizing of Israel and its supporters, and that Jews are white supremacists, that Jews are the terrorists. And if everything is terrorism, then nothing is. We're here calling Hamas the terrorists. Hamas is calling us the terrorists. And if everything is terrorism, then nothing is terrorism. Like, it reminds me of how when Barack Obama was president, Obama was Hitler, according to some, and when Bush was president, Bush was Hitler, and then when Trump was president, Trump was Hitler, and you just go, okay, whoever you don't like is Hitler, and it takes away all the meaning of it. And that's what we're seeing. That's part of Hamas's tactic of media manipulation. And so it's interesting because I have felt this way too. I'll be honest. I think Utah's a very safe place. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but as you know, we got a bomb threat, and we've gotten a few other threatening phone calls and emails. And I'm sure you felt too that that the diaspora doesn't feel particularly safe right now. And yet I've felt safer in Israel with a war going on than I do in the diaspora, due to anti-Semitism. And that's because of Hamas's media manipulation and how they've effectively used also TikTok, social media, stuff like that. But a great TikTok thing that has been going around apparently is that there's this nice Jewish boy who's in college, and he's been going around to people and saying, "Will you sign this petition in support of Hamas and the Palestinians?" And they say, "Yeah, sure." And he goes, "Okay, I'm required to read to you the Hamas charter before I can have you sign, though. That's a requirement." And he starts going line by line through the Hamas charter that talks about, right in the charter, creating a genocide against the Jewish people. Starts and how we're going to throw all the Jews into the sea, and how we are going to kill Jews globally, etc., etc. And he goes, so will you sign this? And they're like, well, I'm not going to sign that. And he's revealing to them what Hamas really is. So, and so with Hamas, the challenge is Israel talks about eradicating Hamas, and you can eradicate their military capabilities. You cannot eradicate an ideology, is the problem. And everyone, though, thinks you need to be on one side or the other. And what Miri Eisen was talking to us about is how you can be pro-Palestine and pro-Israel. I want a better life for the Palestinians. Yes, the Palestinians have had oppression, etc., etc. And Israel does not deserve to live like this. Israel cannot live like this. After that, we went and did, I won't talk too much about this, but we did a walking tour of Jaffa, where I am right now, which was a predominantly Arab city. And today it's about 50-50 Arabs and Jews. And we talked about gentrification and how the Arabs were kind of put here, and, this became the Arab neighborhood and the poor neighborhood. And now it's a wonderful neighborhood and really trendy, and the Arabs are getting priced out of it. And when we walked around, we would see stuff like that some people had put, you have Arabs living on streets named after famous rabbis now and stuff. And so some people were putting their own street signs underneath that had the original names of the towns in Arab, like the original names of the towns, and trying to kind of reclaim that. But what was neat was you saw a lot of things that talked about how Arabs and Jews are not required to be enemies, signs that say that. It was a great example of a place where Arabs and Jews get along. And in fact, I sat in a coffee shop afterwards and for an hour listened to Arabs and Jews discuss politics with each other and over coffee. And that was kind of cool. We then heard from an LGBTQ community that advocates in municipalities and the Knesset, but they've really done a lot to do soldier advocacy during this war. And also they do a lot with refugee support, like for instance, getting LGBT Eritrean refugees to come to Israel, but also with the Palestinians. Being gay in the Palestinian territories is a death sentence. And by the way, when you hear it's kind of ridiculous seeing how the woke uh, community and the LGBTQ woke community has turned on Israel and is super anti-Israel and are shouting, like queers for Palestine, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And there, in these queer Jews I was talking to, were saying, yeah, don't they realize that not only are they saying it'll be free of Jews, all the Jews will be killed, but all the gay people are going to be killed too. You think Hamas is going to keep any gay people around? And so part of what they do is they work to get work permits for queer Palestinians to be able to come into Israel and work. And then while they're working in Israel, work on getting them legal resources to be able to move to Israel, and become Israeli residents. And so that way they can escape the Palestinian territories where they could be killed. But what's been challenging for the queer community here is that all the people who were the biggest threats to the LGBTQ community were elected to office in the last election. And in fact, a leader on the Orthodox Party said on TV, this was before October 7th, that the queer community is a greater danger to Israel than both Hamas and ISIS. And as a result, we've seen increasing hate against the LGBTQ community, and bills passed such as making it more difficult for the queer community to adopt or go through surrogacy. And the Speaker of the Knesset, by the way, he's from the Likud party. He's gay, but he's been not particularly supportive of his own gay community. But everything changed on October 7th. And this is where hopefully we can actually, through this horrible situation, have a better tomorrow for Israel. Um, so, uh, so on October 7th, there was a soldier who got into his named Sagi Golan. And Sagi Golan got into, was going to be married that Friday to his fiance. He was 6 days away from his wedding. And he heard, he was a reservist in the military, and he heard about what was going on in the South. And he called his unit, some guys from his unit. They came and picked him up, and they drove into the Berry community where a massacre was taking place, and took on the terrorists head on. And Sagi Golan was killed by Hamas during the battle. And in Israel, when you are married, you get you get killed in war, your spouse gets death benefits. But also, you are, if you are a straight couple and you're engaged, you get death benefits as well as a widow, even if you're not yet married, but you had plans to get married. Well, when the military came and told Sagi's family that he had been killed, his fiance was there, and unfortunately, the guy who went to go inform the family was rather homophobic and was very disrespectful. Sagi's fiance, and Sagi said, fiance Omer said, asked, am I going to be taken care of? Will I get any benefits? We were 6 days away from our wedding. And the military officer's response was basically, that's not my problem. Take it up with the government. And so he did. And people were outraged that the way that Omer was treated, and were outraged that Omer wouldn't be able to get death benefits. And so immediately, even the right-wing parties went into action saying, like, of course, we're going to explicitly put that same-sex fiancés will get death benefits and Omer will be taken care of. And since October 7th, there's been greater visibility on the LGBTQ community, of LGBTQ people who have been killed in the war. There's also been a viral thing of a lesbian couple in their military uniforms getting married on their base, surrounded by all of their friends.
and their comrades. And so there's been a lot more visibility and a lot more support in the past month for the LGBTQ community, who they're seeing contribute to Israel and our fellow Israelis. And queer soldiers, like right now, the media is talking to any soldier who's willing to talk with them. So queer soldiers are jumping up to talk to the media, and in the interviews will say, by the way, I'm a gay Israeli, and I and what we've seen now is that we're finally equal in death, but we're not equal in life yet. And I am fighting for my country, and I hope that my country will fight for me. And so October 7th, the war represents hope for a better future for the LGBTQ community. And when LGBTQ, especially the trans woke community in the USA, is anti-queer, what they're doing, um, when is anti-Israel rather, when the queer community in the US is anti-Israel, that is making life very dangerous for the queer community here, because because they'll be showing on TV, you know, these woke blue, folks with who are in part of the queer community saying, speaking out against Israel, and Israel's equivalent of SNL, Eretz Nehederet, did a whole sketch on this that you should check out, and it causes Israel to say, "Really, gay people wouldn't support us? Gay people will be in favor of our genocide?" And it makes people more homophobic. And so when the queer community in America does that, um, so anyhow, but we're seeing, like, when that anti-surrogacy, anti-adoption bill came up, 100,000 Israelis marched against it. It was one of the biggest rallies in the history of Israel. Um, and after that, our final meeting was with a Reform rabbi here in Israel who oversees the conversion program for Israelis coming to the Israelis coming um, uh, to well, sorry, for Jews who want to not Jews, non-Jews who want to convert to Judaism, but not through the rabbinate, not through the ultra Orthodox rabbinate. And they came up with a very clever slogan, which was Ger bli hashaker, which means conversion without the lie. Because for so many folks, they always thought, okay, I have to do the ultra Orthodox conversion and pretend I'm going to live that lifestyle, even though it doesn't reflect my values and it's not actually how I'm going to live. And so now the Reform movement in Israel is doing approximately 200 conversions a year. And for folks who are Jews of patrilineal descent, their dad is Jewish, but not their mom, they have a separate conversion program for them to become halakhically Jewish, because even the Reform movement in Israel does not yet recognize patrilineal descent. And so that was, and the ultra Orthodox are furious about this, and uh, and are protesting it and stuff. And what they're doing is they're giving it more exposure. That the Supreme Court ruled a couple of years ago that through the Interior Ministry, you can be listed as Jewish on your ID card if you convert through the reform movement. And that's also created a lot more diversity in the reform movement, which we saw because we went to Shabbat services tonight at Tel Aviv's largest reform synagogue. And there were Black people there were Asian people there were Indian people there, and there was a lot of diversity. Now, so that was largely my day, and I thought, or so I thought. And then we had services. And in the middle of services, for the first time since I've been here, a siren went off. And we had to stop the service. The rabbi started yelling at where the bomb shelters were. And we had to get up and run out of the room and go to the bomb shelters. And as I was about to enter the bomb shelter, I heard explosions, which was these big booms that like even shook the building a little bit, and that was the Iron Dome intercepting the rockets, and I heard five booms. But you then have to stay in the bomb shelter for a little while because giant pieces of rocket are going to rain down, and that could hurt or kill you. And so uh, it was, I felt safe, to be honest, but it was tough that we went into the bomb shelter and the kids immediately went to the play space in the bomb shelter and started playing with each other because this was normal for them. And they go, "Oh, we're going to the bomb shelter. We get to go play in that area." And one of my colleagues talked about how so many people have told us, be safe, be safe, be safe. And every single one of us have heard at some point in time that we shouldn't go on this trip. It's too dangerous. It's not safe. And he talked about how we often think in America that the um, most important thing is safety. And he said, I think after watching those kids play in the bomb shelter, and then as soon as that was over, going back up to services, the most important thing for us is being Jewish. And we we are, showed even with those rockets, we're being Jewish. And by being here, we're being Jewish. And when I was in the bomb shelter, this elderly lady walked up to me, and she threw her arms around me and kissed me on my cheek and said, "Thank you for coming. Thank you for still being here. And I love you. Um, thank you for being with us." Because there's been a few rabbinic solidarity trips to Israel, delegations, but we're the only trip that anybody knows about that was planned before the war broke out that made the decision we're not going to cancel. We're still coming, and wasn't planned after the war. Um, so that was really powerful. And then we went, and it made me think about how at Kolami, our services were interrupted by a fake, by a bomb threat when there was no bomb. And here in Israel, our services were interrupted by a real terrorist attack of people actually trying to kill us. And we were there trying to, so we had this moment where Hamas literally tried to kill us in Tel Aviv. They were hoping that they would kill us. And after we went back up to the service, the very first thing we did was the rabbi got up and pulled out a massive blanket to use as a chuppah and called up five new Jews by choice to give them a blessing who had just finished their conversion that week and had been approved by the Beit Din and gone to the mikveh. And so it was like this incredible moment that Hamas had just tried to kill Jews, and um, and Hamas had just tried to kill Jews. But what we did in response, the first thing we did was create new Jews, and that was amazing. Um, but one of my colleagues broke down in tears, and she said that as a rabbi, she doesn't really get to enjoy Shabbat. She's working on Shabbat. She's writing sermons, giving, leading services, schmoozing with people afterwards. Um, and she was so excited about this Shabbat because it was going to be her first Shabbat in months that she could just be a person and just have a relaxing Shabbat, and she felt that was taken from her. So, and following the service, uh, we had dinner with folks from that community. So that was my day today. Um, what thoughts, what questions, comments do folks have out there? Anyone? Bueller? All
So
right.
you talked about the responses that are going on to be supportive to the queer community in Israel and like being dismayed at what's going on in other queer communities. I have been watching personally a lot of uh, queer and specifically trans populations doing the whole anti-Israel thing. But I know that there's also a lot of us who really want to be able to do something to show that it's, not all of us. We're not sure how best to show our support for
Mhm.
people in Israel. Did you hear anyone say anything that we might be able to take and use to show that there are trans people, in America, if nowhere else, who don't want or who do want to show that we support, Israeli lives, for crying out loud?
Sure. Thanks, Ari, for the question. Um, and yeah, the folks told us, and I've heard this over and over and over again, is that in the West, this battle is being fought through social media, and said, please use your social media to stand up for us. Please use TikTok to stand up for us. Please use whatever you can to stand up for us. So that's one thing. And I talked to one of my mentors who now lives in Israel, Rabbi Don Gore, who I love and adore. And Rabbi Gore is gay, and he was the first openly gay rabbi of a large synagogue in America that wasn't like an LGBTQ synagogue. And I was talking to him about how it's particularly hard in Utah because in bigger cities, you have queer synagogues and places like that and organizations that can help. And that I've heard since this war began, and even before this war, that people of the queer community who have often experienced rejection in their lives uh, have been rejected by their queer community for supporting Israel, and that's been a lonely experience. And so, what I'd love to do, so to answer your question, how the queer community can help is by speaking out, by standing up for Israel, by using your social media to also say like, "Hey, I'm a trans person in America. I'm a queer person in America, and this is why I stand with Israel. This is why I support Israel." Um, and how I can do a better job supporting the queer community is by using the resources I have, like Rabbi Denise Ager, who's one of the most famous rabbis in America and a giant advocate for LGBTQ rights. She performed the first same-sex wedding in California's history, and also folks like the leaders I met today from the queer community in Tel Aviv, and talk with and have them like Zoom them in for a special session with the queer community so that the queer Jewish community knows that they're not insane for supporting Israel, and that is way more in line uh, as queer people supporting Israel than standing with Hamas, um, which is committed to not only annihilating every Jew in the world, but every queer person they come across. Other questions?
Rabbi Sam, this is Matt Davidson. I just wanted to thank
Hi,
you
Matt.
for your comment about the Israeli and the Arab in a cafe having coffee. It's important to hear about those things because the Western media sows so much divisiveness and is focusing so much on the plight of the Palestinians in Gaza right now. We don't hear enough about Israelis and what they're doing internally within Israel to sow the bridges and to build bridges.
Yeah, thank you. And yesterday was pretty neat. Seeing how that Arab organization had taken in 250 Israelis um, who had been displaced from their homes, and hearing how Arabs literally were killed trying to rescue Israelis, and uh, and that 70% of Israel's Arab population sides with Israel in this war, and feels more connected to Israel than they previously did. They are upset with Hamas not only for killing their own people, but also feeling like they endangered them more in living in Israel. And as I mentioned yesterday, you are seeing, ever since the rise of ISIS and now seeing what Hamas has done, a massive increase of Christian Arabs volunteering for the Israeli army. So it was really neat hearing these Arabs and Jews like debate, but respectfully, and listening to each other and pointing out their commonalities of who they saw as mutual enemies, and so on and so forth. But yeah, any other questions or comments or thoughts? If not, I will talk to y'all tomorrow. Appreciate you all joining in on these sessions, and I look forward to them as evidence that I now have to find my own way back to my hotel, because our session ran long and I wasn't going to talk to you all on a bus with try and compete with the tour guide talking into his microphone and stuff. But yeah, I appreciate your interest in this, and I'm very proud to represent Utah here. And by the way, none of my colleagues are around for them to hear me say this, but people are so excited to meet me here, of all the rabbis, because they're here because we've largely been meeting with progressive Jewish leaders, and today we met with the LGBTQ leaders. And when I say I'm from Utah, they go, "You do the Utah marriage licenses," because we're the only place in the world, I believe, where you can get an online marriage license. And I said, yeah. And over the past month, I've done about 8 Zoom weddings for Israelis, and have a couple more next week, because these folks want who said we're never going to get married because we don't want to endorse the Rabbanut, or they couldn't get married through the Rabbanut, said we have to find a way to get married, so that if we die in this war or something, my spouse will get death benefits. And this war has made us realize how much we want to be married to each other, and should be married to each other. And so they've been very excited to meet me and partner with me. And for the progressive rabbis here, what I've told them is that I don't charge for any of those weddings. I do them completely pro bono as my service to the state of Israel and its people, and the advancement of progressive Judaism in Israel. But the Reform and conservative rabbis here, that's part of how they make their living, is by doing weddings that aren't legally recognized, but people who want to have a ceremony. And so I offered to many of them, I said, if you have a couple that you have a wonderful connection with, you're their rabbi, you're going to marry them, they want you to marry them, do that, and have me zoom into the wedding for 30 seconds to see them and their witnesses and fill out the paperwork. And so that way you can do a wedding and their wedding, and I can do the 30 seconds of paperwork, and they'll be legally married. And so we're making a huge difference in just the number of Israelis who've just come up to me and hugged me and cried in my arms and said, thank you for being here. Thank you for standing with us. And just our presence here, making them feel not alone in this world, has really been made this experience worthwhile. And even for the first time having to run into a shelter, I'll upload a video of that experience on my Facebook. I didn't feel unsafe, and in fact, I felt a lot of solidarity with folks, and we all seemed to know we were going to be okay. So yeah. All right. Thanks everybody. Join me tomorrow. Shabbat shalom to all of you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Latot. Nicola Lev.
Shabbat shalom.
And thank you.
Thanks
Of
very
course.
much.
Thank you for joining.